Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Pause the video at the beginning here so that you can grab a notepad, because I want you to make a commitment to yourself that you will jot down some notes, some kind of action item that you can implement in your business today, because that's what it's all about. Let's drive your business forward. Let's implement innovation. He said, she said. I was recently involved in a conversation with another manager in our organization, and he was seeking advice regarding how to handle a situation in which one person had reported another person for doing something that was unacceptable. And I pondered this, and I wanted to share with you. There were a couple of things that came out of this that I thought all of my organization and you would benefit from understanding. So we want to take things back to first principles. And when I was considering this, I actually paused after he asked me his question. I paused for a moment, and there was silence as I reflected. And that is a good thing. And I want to remind you that you shouldn't feel the need to automatically respond to all questions. What your brain is doing is you're going, well, just a second here. Should I respond to this question? Should I answer this question? Is there an opportunity for the person asking me this question to grow? Why are they asking me this question? You don't just default and look for the answer. But in this case, I did feel compelled to give an answer. And what I had to do in that pause was do what I'll often do, which is take a situation that may have some confounding factors, where maybe there's a couple of different things that have been conflated together in terms of the anecdote or the sharing of the story, and you're looking at a puzzle that you can break into its component pieces and make it much easier. You can refer to axioms that you have in management to solve the problem with individual components. I guess that's a little bit abstract, and I'm not being clear, and I'm being a little bit reluctant to share all the details of what happened in this case, but I'll try to make it a little more clear. But the first thing, as the video title suggests, is the he said, she said. And this is something throughout my management career that I really found useful, which is when somebody comes to you, when somebody would come to me and they would start to share some details that was really kind of a complaint about somebody else in the organization. And maybe it's subtle, or maybe it was very overt, that they are essentially passing the buck or blaming something on someone else. If there was any kind of dispute, so no matter what the situation is, I would stop them and I would say, what I'd like to do is I'd like to meet with both of you. So in my example I'm giving, there's two people involved in the dispute or whatever. I'd like to meet with both of you at the same time. I don't want to hear the details from you. So that's the first tip I want to give you today. When somebody is either overtly or more subtly complaining about someone else in the organization, and they're hoping that you will resolve the concern, stop them and say, I want to meet with both of you. And I will assure you there is a reason that they are there without the other individual. People are like, well, I don't want to get anyone in trouble. And there's all sorts of things they say, but you'll be doing yourself a favor, and you'll be better managing, and you'll be displaying better and more effective leadership skills for both the individual who's sitting in front of you and certainly the other one who is absent, who should have their day in court as well. What I would then often say is, have you discussed it with this other person? The two of you should take it up together and try to resolve the concern together. And often the case is that they've had some kind of discussion, and the person in front of you says that the other person is being unreasonable and just shutting them down, won't hear them out, or most likely doesn't agree with their line of thinking in terms of what the resolution should entail. So they're taking it to a higher court, so to speak. And I would say, okay, well, if you guys can't work it out on your own, please book a time which is mutually convenient and come and see me together. What happens, as you can see, is that you will often get different quote unquote testimony. You'll often get a slightly different story, and things are maybe not as embellished or exaggerated from one person's point of view. They are careful with relaying their facts when the other person is there with the opportunity to defend themselves and dispute the first person's versions of the facts. So that's something that you'll really benefit from. Now, this technique works not just with your people, not just with team members on your organization, your employees. This also works when you're dealing with any two stakeholders. It can be a customer and somebody in your organization. You don't want a he said, she said situation, and you're setting yourself up for that. What I noticed before I employed this method was the person who was initially in front of me would state their case, and I would very much empathically relate to them and go, yeah, that's not fair. In your mind, at least, you're thinking, yeah, this is not right. I'll deal with this. And then I would go to maybe reprimand or somehow exercise steps towards resolution with the other person, and I would hear a different story. That person would say, no, that's not what happened at all. Or here are some details they've left out. Did they mention this, that, or the other? And then I go, oh. And then what I'd find myself is sort of the pendulum swinging, where I was seeing it more from the second person's point of view, the second witness, the second party involved. And I thought, this is not good. I would invariably say to the second person, okay, well, we need to get us all together in a room, because that's not what I heard the first time around. And so what I did was going forward, I defaulted to that position because I knew it was going to result in that anyway, which was let's all get together. And being an effective manager is about being effective with your use of time and your communication skills. And so have this video, share this video with your team so that they know what your policy is going to be. And remind yourself, I am not going to get sucked into hearing one side of the story. Think about how a court works. The court doesn't allow for one person to show up and say all his complaints or whatever, and the other person has to be present. You have to be given an opportunity to defend yourself and offer testimony on the other side so that the judge or jury can make a wise decision and something that takes into consideration both sides of the story. So why in business do managers frequently listen to one person make a complaint or come to us with hopes of a resolution when we don't have all the facts? So right now, make a commitment to yourself that and you have to recognize this stuff. As I was going to say, as soon as you recognize this, you'll put the brakes on, you'll stop everything and tell the person, well, as you know, per our policy, you watched the video, as per our policy that Michael described in that video that I shared with you guys, we will not meet one-on-one. We will meet with all parties, all interested parties, stakeholders in the particular dispute will meet at once together. But I was mentioning, you have to get good at recognizing this, because this can sometimes take place without you realizing it. You're just having a normal meeting, and when those very subtle things happen, where somebody is maybe explaining to you why they did not deliver on a particular task, accomplishment of a particular objective, and they will very subtly imply that someone else may be to blame or influence the results. And you're going on and you're having this discussion, and then you fail to realize, oh, this is one of those situations we talked about. And so what you do in that instance, what I would often do in those cases is I would say, oh, so I would stop everything and I'd say, oh, okay, so person X, Y, or Z impeded your performance in some way. They influenced the situation in such a way that I couldn't get what I wanted. The team couldn't realize the results we wanted. The business suffered in terms of performance. That's what you're telling me. And the person sometimes backpedals a little bit, or they downplay it, or they affirm the original assertion that yes, that occurred. And then I would remind them, I'll say, okay, so when I reprimand that person, I just want to let them know that you told me that this is what occurred. And that's sort of a means of testing the resolve of that person, because the person, if they are not telling the facts, will very frequently back off. They'll backpedal from what they're saying, or they will say, well, I don't want them to know that I told you. And I'll say, why? Why do you want anonymity in this case? If it's true, if what you're telling me is true, you shouldn't want anonymity. You should be, I am grateful for you reporting that to me, as should everyone on the team, including the person that you are maybe feel like you're throwing under the bus. They should be grateful as well, because that other person will get an opportunity for improvement. And so as you're considering these situations, bear in mind that it doesn't mean that the other person is going to be in trouble, quote unquote. You may be just coaching them. So that example I just gave of those word tracks, that implies that I'm going to go and talk to that other person individually. And but I still want to default to the original position, the original axiom and foundational principle, which is, no, we don't meet with individuals differently. So what I'm doing instead is just testing the resolve of the person because they subtly implied maybe that someone else was to blame for a particular situation. So I would say, okay, so when I reprimand them, I just want to make sure that I have it clear, because I want to be fair to them as well. You're telling me that they did X, Y, or Z, and that's why we're in this situation. When the person takes a stand, it doesn't matter which way they go with it. If they change their story, then we're back to the original discussion, and the focus is on the person you're meeting with. But if they hold their ground in any way, shape, or form and try to leave any residual doubts that yes, this other person may be at least partially responsible, I would say, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. Let's get that person in the room as well. The three of us need to meet. We all need to meet. And why? Because I want to give each person their day in court. I want to give each person the opportunity to explain. Plus, when there's different stakeholders, you get insights from the different perspectives. Remember, just because somebody says something that is different from another person, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are lying or being intentionally deceitful. They have a different paradigm. They're looking at it from a different perspective. And we want to allow for that. And so getting the interested parties in a room and discussing it together should be your default position each and every time you run into this situation. For fear of confrontation, sometimes I've run into where the initial person is like, oh no, never mind, no, it's my fault. And I'm like, well, just a second here. So were you lying to me a moment ago? Like, why is it a moment ago it was, at least in part, someone else's responsibility, and somebody else was involved in why we weren't able to accomplish this objective, this failure, and now you're backing up? Is this and they'll often say, no, I wasn't exaggerating or lying, it's just I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I don't want to get somebody angry with me. I don't want to be blackballed by that person. Then I'll be treated unfairly by that person, and especially if that other person is in management and outranks them, so to speak. You'll get this kind of response, and I'll say, no, that's not, I won't allow for that to happen. And you want to be sure that you can control that kind of thing in your organization and have a culture where you would not tolerate the truth getting some sort of repercussion from somebody who doesn't like the truth. You want to embrace the truth and a culture of honesty. And so if somebody tries to backpedal out of it, I would say, no, it's okay. We'll meet together. And then what you should do as a manager is try to be a little diplomatic when you have everybody in the room. Don't throw the initial person under the bus by making an accusation that's so strong or whatever. Be diplomatic and just, maybe start by saying, okay, here's the situation. Here's an objective we were trying to accomplish, and I was meeting with person A, and we didn't meet the task, or we didn't accomplish the deadline, and we're trying to figure out what happened. And you mentioned that he was reliant on you in some way as well. Can you give me your perspective? Why did we not accomplish the objective? And I didn't give any details, and I didn't throw the original person A under the bus by saying they blamed it on you or anything. What I did was I said, can you let me know from your perspective, because you were both involved in this task, or you were both involved in this situation. And depending on how volatile the situation is and how incendiary the dispute may have been to begin with, sometimes there's a little bit of defensiveness that comes out and everything. But you've got to, as a manager, as an effective manager, you got to learn to cut through that stuff and get to the details that matter. What you're going to often find is that the guilt, so to speak, the responsibility lay with both parties, that both of them failed the business, failed one another, failed themselves, failed you as a manager in some way. And so that's okay. By the way, the next really important thing that you will do in this instance is you will not spend any time coaching or reprimanding one or the other at this moment. If they were sort of equally guilty of the exact same thing, I suppose you could save a little bit of time and maybe sacrifice the complete effectiveness by having some efficiency of coaching them both at the same moment. I can live with that, but often they failed you in different ways. And it could be that the individual A was failed you by not getting back to you in time to say, hey, I'm going to miss this deadline. And if you watch our video on deadlines, you'll know that there's no excuse not to meet a deadline because we have an out. You can ask for an extension if you need one. And if person A in my example had asked for an extension of the deadline, you'd say, why? And it would come out, well, I'm relying on person B and I can't get together with person B, or they haven't done their task yet, or whatever. And so person A is then sort of off the hook. But when this stuff comes out, so I can make that coaching moment to person A, it's, hey, you know about asking for extensions. You should have come to me beforehand. That's a different coaching moment than person B who knows the reason they failed to accomplish their objective. So that's why I want you to break these things out and reserve your opportunity for coaching or reprimanding, administering consequences of any kind to the people individually. That should just about always be done individually. Don't try to save time and coach people. So when I hear the facts, I go, okay, thank you. All right, thank you. I think I've learned everything I wanted to know. Is there anything else you guys wanted to say? Give them an opportunity to add any more. Often they'll say, no, that's everything I wanted to add. And then I'll excuse one of them or both of them, and then talk to the other individual who's remaining, or one at a time individually. I'll start coaching them on how I can see them becoming more effective in the future, what I want to recommend to them. And in your case, when you're doing this, it may be, before we meet again, I want you to watch this particular video, and you can just share with them one of my videos on deadlines or on, he said, she said, and these types of things, where now you can discuss it and the person gets the concept, and you meet again and you administer your consequences. You formally document. We've got a whole video on accountability, and I won't get into exactly what you should do, but you need to hold people accountable. So you as a leader would be very ineffective if you heard them out you'd be the least effective if you heard out one person and then you sort of blew it off. And then there are varying degrees of ineffectiveness. Maybe you heard out one person and then you sort of covertly administered consequences to person B without hearing out their version of the story or whatever. You get more and more effective as you get to do exactly what I've described, which is meet with all the parties at the same time and then give them the opportunity to share with you all the details and sort of cross-examine one another or defend their case and dispute the facts or the version of the facts that another person is claiming. And then you make a decision, then you make a management decision on how you're going to handle it, how you're going to administer consequences and coach your people. That's most of what I wanted to share with you today, and that's very valuable. I hope you will practice this, but there is a second part to this, and that is that confounding factor where sometimes, because there are two things at play here, in my example I gave a moment ago, is one person fails to meet their objective because they were reliant on person B, and then so those are confounding factors. And so when you look at that as a manager, that's what I was relating to. And this is sort of the second point of this video, which is to break things into their constituent components and say, well, just a second here. What are the axioms? What are the first principles I know? Well, first of all, I'm going to meet with all parties at the same time. So that's one thing. The second thing is I am going to then form a conclusion from that and coach people individually. And it makes your decision making so much easier instead of trying to make things so complex. Sometimes there's so many moving parts to a dispute, to the reason and the stories, the underlying information behind why something doesn't get done, why a business fails in a particular way on a particular task or objective. And you as a manager should not try to solve it all with the big picture. You need to break it out and see fundamentally what occurred. What are the fundamental things? That's why I create these videos, is to break it down to those same things that are recurring. They're ubiquitous and universal to all kinds of businesses. Everybody encounters these things with respect to, say, HR or marketing principles or whatever. These videos will share with you these concepts that you run into time and again. And if you want to make sound, wise management decisions, don't try to solve a Rubik's Cube or some puzzle that's so difficult. You're going to probably make a mistake there. Instead, try to look at what are the root causes that led, that was sort of, what was the initial domino that was knocked over, the chain reaction, I'm mixing my metaphors here, that led to the situation. And it's really important, besides, I said, meeting with everybody, that is one, is then break those things out, and you will find that there are multiple confounding factors, and if you deal with each of them individually, you'll be much more effective as a manager. So I think that's where I want to leave it today. And I hope you got something out of this, and I really want you to make a commitment. The next time that you notice this happening, stop the presses. Slow down and say, wait a minute, I should involve all the stakeholders before I hear the details. Don't allow one person to start to share with you all the problems with another person. And leave a comment so that we can all learn from if you've experienced this, and have you got some other methods that are really useful that have improved your management effective. We need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.